Hello and welcome to today's CUGC Connect. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ, and I'm happy to have EG Innovations back with us today. Presenting for us will be Bala Vaidhinathan. He is the CTO of EG, and he's presented to our webinar audience a few times, so we're excited to have him back. Before we get into his demos and best practices on delivering exceptional end user experience, I want to introduce our moderator. James Rankin is a CTP and Solutions Architect at Howell Technology Group, and James has also done some presentations for CUGC in the past, so happy to have him on today as a moderator. James, you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for turning up to say this. Monitoring is one of my pet peeves, really, rather than anything else, because nobody these days, I think, really does monitoring right. And EG Innovations are one of the kind of vendors that I like to go to when I need people to get their monitoring done properly. And I think it's the client side of monitoring rather than the back end side is the bit where everybody falls down. But as I say, it's something that I enjoy impressing on people the need for. So I am looking forward to that.
Thank you, James. So James is going to keep an eye on all of your questions. We'd like to have you type them into the question panel as you have them. Bala's going to take a break, I think partway through the presentation to see what questions are out there, but we'll probably save the majority of them for the end. But do type them in as you have them. That's what James will be watching for us today. And with that, I'm going to hand things straight over to Bala to get us started.
All right, thank you, Stephanie, and hello, everyone. So let's start. A recent Fast Company report says that more than 50% of full-time workforce will be expected to work remotely in some form or the other by 2020. That's not too far off. Full-time workforce will be expected to do some kind of remote work. Now, on an average, employees are using 3 or more devices for work as of today. So what does this mean? This means the end user explosion, the end user computing explosion is upon us. It is growing rapidly and it is only going to go bigger. Now, for this webinar, I want to talk about how to be successful in this space. Now, we're all here because we partake in this end user computing world, and we are driving it, we are managing it, we are creating it, and Citrix is one of the main vehicles for us, and that's what unites us here. So let's take a moment to think about how to be successful in this space. What do you need to do? What are the areas, not the obvious one like, okay, get Citrix, but once you have the end user computing platform in place, what are the things that can make you successful so you can ride this wave successfully rather than being crushed by it? Now, this is a screen I'll talk about again, but a recent survey by EG, basically, we also did one in 2018, confirmed that Citrix is considered as one of the most performance-sensitive enterprise applications. So we have these two forces coming together. The end-user computing platform, the end-user computing need is exploding. Most people are very comfortable using their own devices, working from home. So there is more and more need for end-user computing. At the same time, the main vehicle we use for end-user computing, Citrix, is one of the most performance-sensitive enterprise applications. 93% believe that this is one of the most performance-sensitive enterprise services. Now, having those two, how do we reconcile this, and what do we need to do to make ourselves successful by making our users happy while delivering Citrix and keeping the end user experience optimum? What are the focus areas? Now, before I talk about that, a little bit about EG Innovations for maybe a few folks out there who don't know about us. We are an enterprise class application and IT infrastructure performance management software provider. That's a mouthful. We essentially help our customers deliver their IT services better. We we help our customers change their IT into a business productivity tool, which is what it should have been, which is what it should always be. We help our customers accelerate their IT deployments, but most importantly, we help our customers keep their end users happy. Why do customers come to us? Because their applications are typically having problems, their end users are typically complaining, and performance problems take a long, long, long time. Now, let me have our customers talk about what we do for them. Respond to 99% of issues within 4 minutes. So these are real customers. 25% higher server density, totaling 170,000 in hardware cost savings, and achieved over 50% improvement in log-on times. So these are some examples of what we bring to the table, and this is you hearing from our customers. These are some of our customers, and we'll wrap this up quickly by talking about one of the most important customers we have, which is Citrix. We are a global technology partner for Citrix, the only performance management company to be in that bracket. And we have been the monitoring solution, the go-to monitoring solution for Citrix for their Synergy and Citrix Summit and Synergy environments for the past 4 years. So we are the ones who are managing all the infrastructure pieces that they have that run Summit, that runs Synergy. Okay, so with that background, let's dive into how can we be successful in this end user computing future? What do we need to do? Now, one thing to keep in mind is it's not about what technology you use to deliver the end user computing, because the vehicle you use ultimately is becoming more of a commodity. You can go multiple different ways. Citrix itself offers you multiple different ways in which you can service your end user, your customer. What we need to understand is how the landscape of end user computing has changed. Now, a decade ago, the standard of end user experience was what happens in a browser. People wanted to make their application function like what happened in a browser, because most people intuitively understood what was happening in a browser. 20 years ago, it was what was happening in a PC. So if you think about it, earlier versions of Citrix were really custom driven to manage how or look and feel like how a PC would feel. Then later on, it morphed into how it should look and feel for a browser user. Now, in this decade and in future, what's driving user experience, what's driving the standard of user experience is mobile applications. People are used to clicking on their phones and getting what they want in a couple of clicks. That's the kind of user experience we are competing against in future. So if you've got a log-on experience, if you've got log-on that takes 2 minutes, you might be getting away with it today. You're certainly not going to get away with it in future. So the most important thing that you need to focus on to be successful is plain and simply the user experience. And to understand the user experience is not, it's something that constantly changes, right? It's something that evolves constantly, and you need to evolve with it. Like I said, the standard for the future is going to be the way mobile applications behave, and the user experience needs to feel like that for the Citrix users. And that is your comparison. So with that in mind, how do we make Citrix users of future and today happy? It needs to be available at all times. You click, it has to be available. You cannot fail. You cannot afford to not be available. First time you're not available, they're going to be confused. Second time you're not available, they're going to be pissed. Third time you're not available, they're going to move away from you. So you have to be available all the time. You need to make sure you're available all the time. It needs to be performing well too. It's not enough if you're just available, but everything works poorly. It needs to be performing well. lower response time, higher throughput. What does it mean? It means everything needs to happen the way they're expecting it to happen, faster. Generally, things need to be faster, and they need to be able to get their work done, whatever work they're trying to accomplish, faster. Now, this doesn't involve just Citrix, just end user computing elements. This is, as a whole, it's what is the application being delivered through it, in addition to Citrix, in addition to a lot of other factors. But Citrix plays a key role because this is the interface through which they are going to be getting to their services. They are going to be getting to their applications. And so once we've established that it's always going to be available, it's always going to be performing well, proactive resolution before services are impacted, that becomes important. That means you can take care of issues before they start impacting users. Faster mean time to repair. Let's say an issue does happen. Do you have the flexibility? Do you have the information to be able to quickly resolve the issue so that the impact to the user is minimal? And essentially have an extremely well-planned service delivery. That means if there is a potential of hardware failure, you have backup for it. If there is a potential of getting overloaded, you've been able to see it and predict what is going to happen and then add the right kind of resources automatically. So essentially, if you really boil down to the most important thing, it is the user experience, right? If you can keep your users happy, you are going to be successful. And how do you keep your users happy? By managing and monitoring and taking care of your environment effectively, that you're constantly looking at the user experience. You're making sure that the user experience is never compromised. So let's see how we are going to accomplish that. Let's break down this nebulous user experience, right? It's an interesting thing because everybody looks at it differently, and that is part of the reason why it is challenging. Some people might look at it and say, okay, I'm looking at ICA latency or HTX latency, and that's user experience. I call it a day. Some people can look at it and say, okay, I need to look at how long does an application take to launch, or how much is the application response time, and that's my user experience. Some people might look at logon experience. Some people might look at what is happening within an application. But in reality, all of this are part of the user experience. You have to do all of these things right for you to deliver optimal user experience. So how do we do this? It's not a one metric thing. It's a composite. There are a lot of things you need to take care of. The first and foremost, logon. You need to make sure logon is good. You need to make sure the applications can launch and launch in a proper amount of time. And then the overall HDX or ICA latency is good. And then whatever additional things that they are trying to do happens as the user expects. A combination of all of this is what ideal user experience is. So now how do we monitor it then? Because it's a lot of different things, and a lot of people have different approaches. And in simply speaking, the take on this is you have to use a combination of multiple approaches. If you can just look at real-time user experience, that's good, but it misses a few things. If you monitor, you need to look at things from a network perspective. You need to look at things from a server perspective. You need to look at things from a simulation perspective. You also need to look at things from a client perspective. So you need to be able to look at all these different approaches, because if you just take one of these approaches, and there are tools out there that look at network and say, I can look at network and I can give you session details. That is good, but you will not have client-side diagnostics or server-side diagnostics. If you're just monitoring from the client side, that is good to an extent, but you're not going to get network level diagnostics or server side diagnostics. And so every approach has its pros and cons. So the best way to do this is a combination of multiple approaches. It's not just one approach. It's not just looking at server. It's not just looking at client or network. So how do you do this properly? You use a combination of synthetic monitoring and real user monitoring. So synthetic monitoring essentially simulates a user connection, simulates user activity, and then it enables you to test network from the client side. So a combination of that covers a lot of things you need to cover. In addition to that, you also need to do real user monitoring. What is happening in the real user session? That you will get from within the session, and you can look at the server side, and you have the ability to correlate what is happening on the network side also. So a combination of these two approaches is what's going to make you successful. Now, I'm going to show you this in a demo to illustrate what I mean by this and illustrate how it's important for you to cover all these different pieces. Okay, with that, let me jump into this demo. Okay, so this is a demo in the sense we've kept something's broken so you can see how we can identify these problems, but out and out, this is actually a web service that I'm connecting to. EG can be EG solution can be used as a web service, consumed as a web service, or in-house software, whichever way you choose to go. In this example, we are running a few logon simulations on our manager here, and you can see all the different individual logon simulations. So the most important and the first step for managing user experience is going to be your logon simulation. If you get your logon optimal, if you get your logon typical standard logon user experiences, anywhere between 20 to 40 seconds, and you can narrow it down even further to say 25 to 35 seconds. If you're in that range, if you're able to reduce it even further, great. But you need to be able to get there. It's not enough if you say, okay, for 2 years it's been 1 minute and 10 seconds. That's how it's going to be. You need to be able to see how you can improve that. So here is an example of a logon simulation that looks at not only how to connect, but also logs in through your web, launches an application, checks how successful the application launches, and gives you a breakdown across the board. Now, where customers benefit from this most is this is running 24/7, and this is a simulation. So I cannot count how many number of times we have had this catch problems. Somebody makes a change, and that creates an additional delay in NetScaler front or authentication front or application launch, and we catch this before the user traffic comes in. So simulation also checks things from multiple different locations in the globe. So you can have the logon simulation running from different parts of your organization. That way you will know for sure that all these different people can log in and launch an application, wait until it's successfully launched, and then log out. So all this testing process will be done 24/7, and that's an important part of making sure that when the users are ready to come in, everything is tested and ready for them to go. Now, here you can see the breakdown. It says how long it took in client processing on the browser side, NetScaler web storefront web URL access, how long it took on authentication, how long it took for enumeration, HTTPS session establishment. And you can see the most of the time is taken in application launch. Okay. Let's look at another example. Here you will see a different example. Very similar. This is for the application Outlook. And you can see authentication took much longer here. It took about 45 seconds. That is the main consumer, or that is the main reason for this 70-second response time for logon. So this gives you a perspective of where things are breaking. So you can focus on that particular area to fix it. So this is simulation, right? This is going to check constantly 24/7. Now, let me show you what happens when a real user experience is tracked. So this is a user experience dashboard in EG that tracks all the current users that are currently logged in this small environment, right? And here you can see all the different users, and they are in different states. So red means they're in critical state, orange, medium priority alert, and yellow means low priority alert, green means they're good. You can see HTX latency, network latency, bandwidth usage. So you can compare HTX and network latency at the same time, and it refreshes to give you the latest status constantly. Now here, let me show you a real user login. So I'm going in, the session is Tim. So log on details. So I can see I'm getting this detail from multiple different locations within the Citrix environment, from the delivery controller, from XenApp, but I'm able to put this together in one snapshot. So currently logged in, yes, you can see where he is logging in from. Okay, what is the client he is using, client version, client type, and log on time breakdown from delivery controller. So how long brokering took, how long interactive session took, HTX connection, overall session startup duration. And you can see server-side processing, client-side processing. And this is real user. So group policy processing took 5 seconds. You can drill down and you can see all the different group policies that took this time. So not only are we giving you simulated, but we are also giving you real user transaction, real user logon time. Now, these two pieces combined together, if you have this in place, there is no longer an excuse for you to have poor logon time, because now you're getting logon visibility and logon breakdown across all the real users who are logging into your environment. So anytime there is a slowdown, you will know exactly why there is a slowdown, so you can improve it. So when you start in your environment, it's not going to be perfect, but with something like this, the visibility you get, it's going to constantly enable you to make your user experience better. And that means the first impression you make when a user connects into your environment is going to be one of a very positive note. You don't want your logon experience to be poor, because that starts off a chain of expectations that even if the other things are better, they are going to always have, your first impression is going to be poor, in simple terms. So you make that better, the overall experience is going to be better. So what about other things in user experience, right? You can see a lot of metrics that we're collecting. You need to be able to collect a lot of metrics. So remember, I talked about user experience means it's a lot of things. It's not just a simple logon. It's not just an application launch. It's a combination of all these things. So you can see here in this example, screen refresh latency is 5.3. So we are collecting session resources information here. So you can see CPU usage, memory usage, all of this, HTX channel information. Okay, in this, you can see screen refresh latency is poor. However, it's not because of client network's latency. Now, typically, your first instinct when somebody's HTX latency is bad is to say, okay, your network must be poor. But in this case, it's very clear that the network is not poor. But the problem is with printer bandwidth consumption. So background print shop taking a lot of resources and choking down the pipe. And that causes slowdown for this user experience. You can look at other users and you will see other things. So for example, in this case, screen refresh latency is fantastic. Latency average is fine. Client network latency is also fine. So let's look at user experience dashboard again. Let's pick a different user. So for example, in this user, so this is a user experience visual dashboard that your help desk can use and see what are the different problems that the user is having here. HTX channel usage, top memory process. You can right away see that Java GUI is consuming a lot of memory, and it's also consuming a lot of CPU. So you right away know that there is a process hogging resources. Right, so you get the visibility you need across your entire user session activity. Now here is a different breakdown, right? So we saw an example where HTX latency happening, but it was not because of network. But in this example, you can see HTX latency happening, but it is because of network. It is right there. You don't need a lot of interpretation to understand what is going on here. Okay, so I can go drill down, look at the browsers being used by users, and you can actually see the different processes running, and you can even see the URL that the users are using. Again, this is a little bit of an insight into the level of detail you need to be collecting for you to get the visibility that you need, right? So at this point, you know that this user is using IE, and these are the URLs that the user is going to, and you can see the kind of processes and resources this session is consuming. So you have information at your fingertips. So you see a user, you would be surprised how many times we see people watching Netflix and complaining that the Citrix connection is slow. It is not obvious to them why it would be slow. But so that's an insight into a peek into what you need to be doing to be able to manage and measure your user experience, right? So we looked at it purely from a user experience standpoint. Okay, at this point, I want to go back into the presentation, but before I do that, I'll stop here to take a few questions.
That's good, Bilal, because I have a load of questions for you. Right, let's see if we can take them with various bits. We've got, I think, Mohammed was the first to send a bunch of questions in, asking about special organisations like government, police, defence that have lots of firewalls and net scalers and things like that within their environments. So I think what he's trying to ask, and please, Mohammed, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, is, where you've got kind of segmented networks and lots of firewalls and whatnot for secure networks. Is there any reason why EG Innovations should or shouldn't be able to, monitor in those sorts of environments?
That's an excellent question, and this is why the architecture of a monitoring solution is important. And if you're relying upon client-server-based architecture that's tied to ports, this is going to be an environment that you will not succeed. Whereas EG depends on a web architecture, and the way we work is essentially enables us to work across multiple segmented firewalled environments. In simple terms, our manager works as a web application, just like how I was able to connect to it as a web service. It works as a web application even within your network. So as long as you can make an outbound web connection from within whatever parts of your network, you will be able to reach the manager. Even within your environment, if you're able to just make an outbound connection to the manager, that's all needed. The data collectors that are running in your environment are simply making web requests to the manager when they're transferring data. So it's easy for us to work through multiple firewalled and segmented, regimented environments. And in addition to that, the logon simulator would typically work like a user. And in those situations, you are basically, no matter what firewalls you have, no matter what you have, you are able to go through that and collect statistics. In this way, you are able to give breakdown as to if there is a potential problem because of those restrictions, we will be able to even say that.
Cool. The bit that Mohammed said was, can you see firewall latency within your tool as well? Is that something that can be measured? It's almost kind of, I'm just trying to think around that about firewall latency. I don't know whether they're talking about the latency of the connection to and from the firewall and whatnot around that.
The answer to that question is yes, but it also depends on what kind of access you can get on that firewall. Obviously, we can collect statistics on the firewall itself and measure firewall latency. We support a lot of different firewalls that are out there that people commonly use. So we can measure what firewall is reporting as firewall latency. And we can also run probes, basically things like logon simulator from the outside. One goes through firewall and the other goes direct. And then we can measure latency difference and say this is what's cost. This is the cost of the firewall being in that situation. So cool. The answer to the question is yes, but it also depends on the kind of access you get to the firewall.
Okay, we've got a few from Srijan. I may apologise if I am pronouncing your name wrong. First one is, can we simulate application launches after a Citrix desktop launch with the logon simulator as well?
Correct. Actually, that is what the logon simulator does. The logon simulator actually goes through the entire process where it logs into the session and launches an application, waits for the successful launch of the application, and then closes the application and logs out. So yes, it does check for application launch, and that is a feature a lot of our customers use regularly because they want to be able to test if their users can launch certain applications that they constantly use from different parts of that environment.
Cool. Also got another one from Srijan. When you say proactive resolution, does it resolve any issues automatically?
Does it resolve any issues automatically? Yes, it can. I
So
will
you can
talk
configure
about that
response,
a little bit. I will talk about that a little bit as we go along
Okay,
in the
that's
second
cool.
part of the webinar.
It's coming up. Also from Srijan, do you need to install an agent on the user device? So does it run agentless, or is there an option to run it agentless, or does it have to be agent-based?
There is an option to be run agentless also. From a user device standpoint, you can run agent-based or agentless. So there are multiple options and on how you can collect data from a client device. And primarily, when in our approach, we do not recommend collecting data directly from every client device. That means you're adding another piece of software to all the different client devices that you have. That kind of defeats the purpose of centralizing everything with Citrix. So the best approach that we see that works with our customers is they have a pool of collectors for collecting data from the client devices, and they use it and deploy it as they need. But primarily, all the client-side information we can collect without having any probes on the client side, from the server side and network and NetScaler, from all the pieces that we can touch within the Citrix data center.
Cool. There was another one from that I wanted to grab there. Where is it? I've got a whole lot of them. That's an interesting one from Russell. Can this product detect any user security issues? Because I've seen products before that kind of they look for things that sort of indicators of compromise on the network and things like that. Is that something that EG Innovations can do?
Yes. The answer to the question is yes. We do something called as baselining, and we use it as part of our threshold. So we create trends based on the traffic that we see in the environment over a period of time. So we see what happens to when the peak traffic is, let's say it's Monday morning or Tuesday afternoon, and during the peak traffic, what are the other things that happen? And that goes in as part of the baseline, as part of our intelligence. And anytime there is a significant deviation from the baseline, say, for example, on a Sunday afternoon, which is supposed to be a lean time, you're getting maximum amount of requests or load on the system, it will flag it as activity that is not expected, and you will start getting alerts for it. So it tends to catch unnatural things that happens, and that umbrella catches more security issues.
Cool. I've got a couple more, as I said, I've got a load here. There's an interesting one from Zach. Does EG Innovations have a black box like SysTrack? I think I know the feature, I remember that from SysTrack, where you can go back to a specific time and see exactly what was happening at that particular point. And if so, do you aggregate that data so that in query, you know, specific points to see what processes were over thresholds for specific durations? I know the bit that he's referring to in SysTrack, it's like a kind of like a time machine. It takes snapshots, you know, some fairly recent ones and some, you know, maybe a week back and things like that to show you what was going on at the time. Is there anything like that within the AJ product?
Right. The answer to the question is yes. But it's not exactly the same. The way we do it is we collect all these metrics that we collect, and all these metrics are time-stamped and stored in our database. So when our customers want to go back and look at what happened between 2 to 3 on Monday, we can bring up the data and basically put all the data right next to each other in the graph and say, okay, this is what happened. So then you will be able to see at 2:15, somebody was running this. or Outlook or something that started consuming a lot of resources, and that trickled down into other users having CPU problems by 220, and by 225 people are dropping off of that server. So you'll be able to see what happened, because all the metrics we collect can be correlated and brought together under one report or one graph, and that will be used to be able to see what happened during that timestamp. Exactly between two timestamps, what happened.
Cool. We've got another couple down there that kind of meld together a bit. We've got one, somebody asking how different is it from Citrix Director, and also another question saying that they're looking for a monitor solution to manage and monitor their workstations and their Citrix environment, and saying, is it recommended to? If it's not recommended to add all workstations to a central monitoring, then they're looking at Nexthink and Systrack and EG themselves. So I guess it's a bit of an open-ended question. What's the main differentiators from your perspective to Nexthink and Systrack, who are two of the sort of the very deep monitoring tools, if I'm correct about that, and obviously Citrix Director, which a lot of us get just because through our Citrix licenses. So what's the key differentiators there?
That's a good question. I think it would be a question that one thing, I didn't get the context of the first part of your question. I can talk about what is the differentiator between us and somebody like Systrack or Director for sure. But initially you had mentioned some context. I missed that.
Yeah, it was from Srejan saying, my organization is looking for a monitoring solution for both their workstations, obviously probably fat clients, I'm presuming, and Citrix as well. So it said, as you said, it's not recommended to add all the workstations to a central monitor. So I'm guessing he's asking, should he consider EG to monitor all the workstations as well as the Citrix environment, I guess?
The answer to that question is yes, and we can work with you and show you a better way to do that, because typically monitoring every single desktop, if you're at that place, I think you have bigger issues that needs to be addressed at a different level. Typically, when you deliver Citrix, what you want to go away from is managing every single end client individually. Your goal is to centralize the application delivery. Your goal is to centralize the content that people can see and things that people can do. And irrespective of the devices they're coming from, your goal is to give them a consistent experience. And if you're forced to look at all those individual, I'm assuming fat clients individually and monitor them individually and track issues and challenges there individually, that is a separate project that is outside of what you would do with Citrix. I think that is a situation that can be addressed in a better way if you have some of those challenges. I'd love to understand a little more about why you're looking to do something like that. What are the challenges you have? Maybe that's a question for an offline discussion, Srijan.
Cool. That was, as I said, I've got a few more. I'm hoping I'm putting them out. We've got one that says, how complicated is this to set up? Also, Mohammed asking, do you have a trial version? Is there a white paper to install it? I know from my own experience, you've got a trial version, and I will assume that you've got the right documentation on installation and configuration. How complicated is it to set up? I guess every vendor will always tell you that they're dead simple to set up, but I have set up EG Innovations myself, and it wasn't. I'm not going to come out and say this. I was going to say it's not as complicated as other products in the market. So there you go. That's as far as I'll go with that one. There's also people asking about collecting data on external devices and setting up probes, external probes as well. Is that possible?
Correct. Yeah, external probes is possible. Our data collector is basically a piece of software. So you can pretty much, if you can visualize it running somewhere, you can run from there and test whatever you want to test at any different location. So we have different people doing things like testing their Citrix availability and the application launch response time, logon response time from multiple different locations in the globe through their main data center. And we have people doing that in multiple different from the multiple different locations in the globe. We have people doing it in multiple different cities in US and multiple different branches within a town and even multiple different floors within an organization. So yeah, we have the ability to give you that background.
Okay, I think Srejan, has just dropped his email address in there, so obviously we'll pass that across to you. And the only one that's just come in saying monitoring is a busy.
Maybe we can take a few more questions towards the end, James.
Yep,
I
no problem,
want to make sure I can get like 15 minutes to run through some of the other stuff I want to talk about.
Yep, that was the very last one. I'll save that one for later on. So I shall now go in and mark all of these as read, and you can crack on, mate, and move on.
All right. So thank you very much for the questions, everybody. So keep them coming, and we'll try to get to the rest of it towards the end. So the second thing I want to talk about is, first we talked about focusing on the user experience, right? How user experience is going to drive what makes you successful in this end user computing future. Now, simplifying Citrix service management. And the key word is Citrix service management here. It's not just Citrix management. If you are thinking that you can manage Citrix by managing XenApp, you are looking at it wrong. Because let's take an example of how Citrix works, right? You've got end users, you've got applications, and all of that. End users are consuming applications. Your Citrix is part of the infrastructure that is running there. Your applications are running on top of your infrastructure, which is Citrix. And the users are interacting mainly with the applications, but through Citrix. So in simple terms, for Citrix to be successful, for the end users to accomplish what they want to accomplish, everything in this picture needs to work together and work perfectly. So you've got to have your delivery controller, license server, directory server. This we all know, but your physical and virtual servers need to work fine too. Your network needs to be aligned. Your applications need to be functional and successful. And all of this needs to be available to the user when they try to access the service. Now, ultimately, what do the users access? They access service. That's all they care about. They want to use the service that they want to use. It's Outlook or it's whatever. For them, it's a service. That's what Citrix is providing to them. Citrix is a vehicle through which they are accessing that service. Citrix is not the end service itself. It's a vehicle through which they're accessing the service. And when anything goes wrong, this is why the Citrix field or the Citrix administrators always take the brunt of the blame game, because it looks like something is wrong in Citrix. Since Citrix is the interface, Citrix is the vehicle through which all of this is delivered to the users, anything goes wrong anywhere, people tend to think it's a Citrix problem. Now, how do you manage Citrix? So as we saw in the previous screen, it's not just XenApp. It's all these different elements that are working together. Citrix has given us a rich palette of things that we can deliver to our customers. With that comes the complexity of managing and aligning all of these things properly. So if you look at Citrix Director, I think there was a question regarding that previously that I tabled for later. Citrix Director only covers a very few pieces in this. So you're not getting a comprehensive view. Now, if you look at siloed approach, if you're just looking at end user, that's all you're looking at. You're missing out on everything else. If you just look at network, that's all you're looking at. You're missing out on everything else. If you just look at XenApp and XenApp stuff, that's all you're looking at. But ideally, you should be looking at all of that, every single aspect of this. And how do you do this effectively? There are a lot of different technologies, a lot of different platforms and applications and things that you need to manage. So this is where it gets a bit overwhelming, right? So when that happens, when a problem that can happen in NetScaler, that can happen in delivery controller, license server, profile storage, SAN, or firewall, it could impact the end user. Where is the root cause? This is where we are most of the times. And this is the challenge you need to successfully address for you to be successful. When there is a Citrix problem, it is always blamed on Citrix. The service is having an issue, it's blamed on us, and then we have to go and look at a bunch of different tools, because there are a lot of different elements that you need to take care of. You have to look at a bunch of different tools and try to figure out where the problem is. right? This is manual. It's giving you a siloed view into all those different pieces. You're not truly looking at it as a service. Now, even if you look at it as a service, okay, here's a cloud piece in there. So that's adding to the adding to the simplicity. I'm being sarcastic here. So taking some of these things into cloud means, yes, you are handing over some of this to Citrix. So they will take care of some of that. But at the same time, you need to make sure that what is coming out of Citrix is meeting the SLA and is working well within your internal XenApp servers that you host. So what you really need is a unified monitoring of everything. And that's what EG provides you. It provides you the ability to look at all the Citrix products and platforms. It provides you the ability to look at all the supporting products and platforms. It provides you the ability to look at user experience, look at network, a consolidated single pane of glass view, including Citrix Cloud, into your Citrix environment. Okay. Now, in addition to that, you need artificial intelligence. You need, and I'll explain this as I show you guys the demo, why this is important. You need something to make sense out of the data that is coming out. There are too many different applications, too many different platforms, too many different moving pieces for you to be an expert in everything. When you can't be an expert in everything, imagine your help desk. He's going to pass everything on. He or she is going to pass everything on to you whenever there is a user complaint. What you want is a solution, is a software that has enough intelligence, enough analytics, enough AI to be able to handle those things as much as possible and providing you, reducing the complexity and providing you with the information you need, not data points. Now, let's look at a demo to see how this can be resolved. Now, the first thing I will talk about is monitoring Citrix as a service. So here is an example of that. There are two services being monitored, Citrix Cloud and Partner Access. Right away, you can see that this is not a bunch of Citrix servers you're seeing a service. I'm clicking on Partner Access, and the first thing I see on that service is breakdown of end user experience. So this is simulated transactions, which is accessing the app, updating the item. So it is acting like an end user, emulated transactions, and you can see some of that is slow. Now, I looked at the service, I looked at the end user experience of the service, and I'm able to see that things are slow and things are not working the way they're supposed to be working. Now, this is where a lot of tools will stop and say, hey, you have a problem. Great. What do I do now? Where do I start? What do I fix? That's why EG reduces the priority of these user impacting issues and says, okay, this is an effect of problem somewhere else. So let's drill down to see where the actual problem could be. And this is where you see the power of being able to look at it as a service. So now, instead of looking at individual XenApps and looking at a XenApp to see what is happening within a XenApp, or looking at a delivery controller to see what's happening within a delivery controller, you're looking at a true end-to-end service. Now, all these applications, all these components are working with each other to deliver this service to the end user. And you're able to see all of them as an atomic single unit. And what this does for us is enables us to see all of these elements are working towards delivering a service to the end user. That means we can apply artificial intelligence on top of it and understand that this is a single element. This is a single service. That means the dependencies impact each other. So when you have a problem with XenApp, that could impact your delivery controller. You're running out of sessions, then Storefront is not going to enable you to log in. If you have a big issue with Storefront, people cannot launch sessions inside XenApp. So you will be able to see those dependencies. And EG uses artificial intelligence on top of what you see in the topology here to get to the information that you need. Right? So here you're breaking down all the different elements and their health and how they are connected with each other. So in this case, there's a problem with XenApp, okay? There's a problem of CPU consumption in that particular XenApp. So let me drill down and see what's going on. If I see that, that XenApp is actually part of an ESX host, and the ESX host has a problem. That's a critical problem. So I'm actually drilling into XenApp. So that ESX VM mapping is automatically discovered, and you can see one VM creating a problem. I drill down into it, and it's a VM that is consuming a lot of CPU. I drill down further, and it tells me it's the backup process that's taking up a lot of CPU. It's on an Oracle server that has nothing to do with Citrix. It's just sharing the ESX, so some of the Citrix servers are running on. Now, just take a step back and think about this. In real time, if this comes out, if you had this problem, this is a backup taking up a lot of CPU on a Oracle server that has nothing to do with your Citrix environment, and this is not something you would be even considering when you're trying to troubleshoot your problem. With EG, you're able to drill down and exactly see where the problem is. But the drill down was there to show you how we got to this problem, how the software actually is able to put the service map together, and more importantly, give you the understanding of why service is important, right? Now let me look at the current alarms. So this current alarms, change the background page. This current alarms, so you can see about 16,900 metrics, right? Now we are monitoring all of these things under one console, including your cloud, including your virtualization elements, all of these. EG supports over 180 different types of platforms and applications. All of this being looked at under a single pane of glass. Now we have correlated the issues, and we have told you exactly where the problem is. So you can see the different alerts. So these are all the effects, and this is a main problem. So what this tells you is, if you take care of this particular issue here, so if I click down there, and it's going to take me exactly where I was looking at before, and I can look at this. And it's the same exact alert. Now, what's good with this, how this alarm window helps you is, think of it this way. Typically, you're not going to be able to get all these metrics under one console to begin with. So you are looking at multiple consoles already, and a bunch of these alarms are showing up in multiple consoles. When this real problem happens, this is how it's going to look like. Just see that I've hidden the priorities. Once I've hidden the priorities, the onus is on you to try to figure out which problem you should be addressing now. Now, without the priorities, everything looks the same. The user complaints might be something that you will start looking at first. Maybe you might not be looking at high CPU utilization in VM cost because of a backup running in the beginning. You might eventually get there, but it's going to take you a lot of time. More importantly, this will be spread across multiple screens for you. So you've got alarms across multiple screens, and the onus is on you to try to figure out where the problem is. Compare and contrast that to what you're seeing here. This is AI in action. The ability to change that data that could be confusing and crippling into information. Because when you're having a problem, more and more data you get, the more pressure it puts on you to try to figure out what is going on. If you get the right information, you're able to solve the problem, because data is open to interpretation. Data is as good as what you make out of it. Whereas if you're given actionable information like this, then you are able to proceed and do what you need to do. So this is critical for you to manage the complexities of today's and tomorrow's end user computing. Keep the focus on user experience. Make sure that you are understanding that Citrix is a service. It's no longer enough to just monitor 2 elements or 3 elements using Citrix Director or SITSTRAC and just look at desktops. It's no longer enough for you to pick and choose what you want to look at and just focus on it, because at the end of the day, when a problem happens, it ripples through your environment. It breaks a bunch of other things, and it becomes difficult for you to differentiate between cause and effects. The applications have become so complex now, you need monitoring solutions that can be smart enough to give you the right information and force you to take care of the problem. So when you have something like this, ideally in this situation, right, you've gotten a high CPU alert. So you got a high CPU alert when the CPU is at 99%. In effect, what will happen is you would have gotten this high CPU alert when the CPU crossed 75%. So if you had taken that into consideration and acted based on your runbook and taken care of this backup, you would have prevented this entire situation from happening. So you would have prevented a issue from impacting the end user. And that's where you need to be. That's where you want to be. And that's how this can help you. Now, all these alerts can be sent into a trouble ticketing system or an incident management system, or based on an alert, you can write scripts to perform corrective actions where kill a session or restart a server, reboot things. So you can perform corrective actions too. And this, in effect, is the is one of the main things that you need to focus on when you walk into monitoring or performance management for future. And this is what's going to make a difference in terms of how successful you can be. Whether you spend all your time troubleshooting and firefighting issues in your complex environment, or you have a measure of control over your environment and you just attend to it whenever it's needed based on the solution that you have. Now, with that in play, let me go back. I think we have a couple of minutes left. I want to touch on a couple of more screens and touch on a couple of more screens and throw it back to Q&A again. So reach across every tier, end to end, depth through the stack, and speed. This is what EG brings to the table. This is a couple of things about our so monitoring the cloud environment. We already saw that. We fully support the cloud environment. I mean, we've been a partner with Citrix for 15 plus years. So anything that they do, we support, and we actively work with them in terms of enhancing their performance management metrics and what they provide to the customer. So we help Citrix, and we are working well together to make sure that the customers can deliver the best experience for their end users. Go beyond monitoring and troubleshooting. Optimization is important. Out-of-the-box analytics is going to help you optimize your environment, plan ahead of time, right-size your environment so you're not throwing hardware at problems, but addressing bottlenecks. We do full stack monitoring. I think I touched on some of this before. We support over 185 different types of applications and platforms. And last but not least, we can help you improve user satisfaction, IT productivity, higher service uptime. We can give you simplicity. I think this is a point that I want to reiterate. Being able to look at things as a service. So the most important thing from an end user computing standpoint and how you can be successful will be managing your user experience. And the second most important thing is to make sure that you can reduce the complexity by making it simple for you. And by making it simple means turning these different pieces into a service, understanding that they are delivering a service to the end user, and monitoring and managing them as a service. That will give you the AI that I showed you earlier that will enable you to make the right decisions and stay ahead of the performance problems. Now, with that, I'm going to throw it back to Q&A.
Thank you very much, Bilal. Just got a few bits in for you. First one we got from, I think it's Frank, not Mohammed, that we've got in there is saying that, do you have to pre-configure access to like Virtual Center and your NetScalers and things like that to be able to drill down through the problem? I'm assuming the answer to that's going to be yes. You'll have to provide the credentials and whatnot to access all the various different parts of the infrastructure.
Right. We do monitoring, not magic. We do have to have access for us to be able to. The important thing is you don't have to install us on all these elements. And for the most part, we can collect. In fact, for all the network elements, all the virtualization elements, we can collect statistics in an agentless manner. So all we need is access for us to be able to query the APIs, and then all the statistics are collected and correlated.
Sorry there, Bilal. I had to jump out because my kids were making a noise and tell them to shut up. So, where have we got? Somebody asking the $64,000 question. What's the pricing like of your tool? Again, probably not something you can give a direct answer to, I suppose. But
Right. I can very clearly say it depends. So it depends on your environment, your situation. And like I said, this is a service that can be consumed as a web service, or it's a software that you can install in-house. And we have various different pricing models based on user pricing or server pricing, depending on whatever works for you. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll work with you.
I say, obviously, you've got a thriving set of partners as well. I'm only saying that because I know that we're setting up a partnership with yourselves. Another one from Zach. Do you do any breakdown of the logon process? I know Zach's having problems with Windows 10 logons, as I've already emailed him actually, because he asked a question in there talking about Windows 10 logons. Can you find bottlenecks of the durations of processes with things like latency and disk stats and things like that? Can you break it down to see where the actual problem is that you're getting?
The answer to that question is yes. The same way we can break down Citrix logon, we can break down Windows logon. Not to that extent of Citrix logon, but for the most part, if you're trying to find a problem in your Windows logon, and if you're having a recurring issue, we will be able to show what's going on, help you with that.
Excellent. As I said, the only other one we had there was from Prashant, who was talking about how do you differentiate against the likes of Control Up or Uber Agent, but I think he's actually left the meeting now. But I mean, that could be a whole webinar in itself, really. And I mean, it doesn't really want to turn it into a sort of a bake-off to say we're different than that. But I think without being too nasty to the likes of Control Up or Uber Agent, they're a bit more of the kind of lighter weight sort of things. I think I would say to people out there that EG sits more in the, would you class yourself as one of the mid-range kind of monitoring tools? Because I know you've got the Lakesides, which are the big, heavy ones at the top end. So where do you see yourself fitting within there?
I'm not sure if I want to classify myself as high range or mid range. I would look at myself as a comprehensive performance management tool for today and for future. So if you're looking at monitoring tools have evolved in a way where they've always gone after applications. So you've had monitoring tools that were good at doing Citrix, right? They stayed good at doing Citrix, and they got better at doing Citrix. You had monitoring tools that were good at doing WebLogic, good at doing Oracle. So this is how monitoring industry evolved. People were good at doing their stuff, and they stayed in their lane. But what has happened with the applications and the services is they've not stayed in the lane. Every service today involves more than one application. Everything is a service today. End-to-end involves multiple layers, multiple applications, multiple dependencies. That's how reality is today. And what we focus on is looking at that end-to-end picture. So we are good at more than one thing. So if you, as I went through the service proposition, if you're looking at Citrix, you're missing out on 70-75% of what you need to be looking at in a Citrix service. So that's where we come in. We look at comprehensive. You can look at just Citrix with us too, and we can do better than a lot of competition out there. But at the same time, where we are very strong in, and you can put us up against anybody out there, is our ability to look at an end-to-end service as it's being used and delivered today, and make that simple to manage for our end users.
Okay, brilliant. That is all we've got in the questions. That's it, all we've got. We're 5 minutes over, so I guess it's just back to Stephanie to finish off.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks, Bala. Thanks for getting into all that. I know there were a lot of questions today. There were a lot of good questions today, and I know that was a lot of information to cover. And thank you, James, for staying on top of those. So very quickly, before you all run away, I have a survey link for you in the chat window. It's short and anonymous, and no time at all, just for us at CUGC. Helps us plan future webinars, so please fill that out. And if you opted in for a chance to win a Google Home, we will announce the winner on Twitter and at mycugc.org. So please follow us on Twitter at mycugc to find out the winner. And also make sure you head over to mycugc.org if you haven't already to find your local group. We have over 70 around the world, and they meet pretty regularly, and they have lots of fun meetings. great information, a great chance to connect with Citrix peers in your area and talk about more things like this. So be sure to find your group and get involved. And with that, I will let all of you go. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know it's summertime and schedules are tricky, so we definitely appreciate you being here. And thanks again to Bala and James.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All
Thanks
right.
again.
All right, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.